Welcome, welcome, beautiful women who are here because you are committed to mending the world, mending the planet with love and compassion and joy and collaboration. And I'm here with dear friend and colleague Connie Viveros, who is talking about collective philanthropy and the relief work that she has done in Africa and contribution and how we can weave the act or the practice of contribution into our lives as women who are in roles of leadership and women who are healers. So I'm so excited to be in this conversation with you, Connie. Thank you so much for being here and imparting your wisdom and your experience with us.
My pleasure and honor to be having this conversation and sharing the amazing work of service and contribution for women.
Yes. So I wanted to, first question is just, kind of passing you the talking stick and just giving us, just kind of a brief summation of the work you've done. And then, of course, I'll have more questions for you about some of your experiences and maybe some of the steps that women who are watching this can take in their own backyards, or if they are wanting to do work abroad, how do we even get our feet in the door? So we'll be kind of going down some of those rabbit holes. But for now, I just wanted to, hear from you. Just like, what is this work? What have you done? Tell us a little bit about the work you've done.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start just by prefacing it with that concept we were chatting about earlier, that I believe we're each born with this innate desire to contribute and be of something greater than ourselves. I think that's part of why we are just born to this earth, is that the honor and responsibility that we hold as human beings to serve others, whether it's our families as young children or and then ultimately mothers and fathers and sisters, etc. So when we're allowed and we step more fully into the grace of service and contributing to the world, it allows us, Jessica, to begin to focus on giving instead of receiving and giving instead of taking. And to me, that is an entirely new perception of how we can live, or the lens by which we can live our lives. And it started for me, I want to say, going on 10, almost 11 years now. I didn't really know and understand. I was trying in my life to fix myself. I went on the journey of, self-awareness and personal growth to fix myself, fix all the ways in which I was hurting and felt diminished or not worthy in my own life. And within the context of that journey, I was invited to do a visionary exercise. And my mentor at that time, who is the late beloved Debbie Ford, she was standing at the front of a room filled with 70 or 80 people. And I remember being towards the back and sitting next to my friend. And she said, just go with me on this journey, even if what you see or hear doesn't make sense to you. So I closed my eyes, and there I was in a 5-6 minute visualization practice. And what I saw sort of played with me. It didn't understand it. I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of faces of Black children. And at that time, I had zero reference to anything remotely. I had actually been in Mexico working in orphanages, and I thought to myself at that time, God must have just gotten the color a little wrong. These must be my kids from the orphanages that I had volunteered in. And it wasn't until 2 years later when I was invited to participate in contributing money, writing a check to build a school in Africa. And again, I'll never forget sitting in that room, and the woman on stage said, who would be willing to help us? My hand went up, and literally it was one of those energetic impulses where you look at your hand, you go, that's my hand in the air. And of course I wrote the check. And upon doing so, it started the journey. And I will never forget the time when Debbie Ford actually said to me, why don't you go to Africa and see the school that you've built? And I just thought, that's such a wild, crazy idea. Why would I do that? I have children, I have responsibilities, I have work here in the United States. And long story short, I was invited, and I got home, and I fortunately had the means to afford to travel to Africa. And I traveled with another woman, another luminary, spiritual luminary and transformational leader, Cynthia Kersey. And I had not really known her very well. And I got on the plane and I went to Africa with her. And she said excitedly, here's the school you helped to build. And I was taken aback. I stood there, and Jessica, tears just streaming down my face. There was my vision. The one that I had had nearly 2 years prior. It was almost verbatim. The look, there were 700, 800, 900 children in the schoolyard. And I stood in front of them as they sang and clapped and danced and celebrated me, a white woman, right, a white privileged woman in their schoolyard. And they didn't know why I was crying. And Cynthia said, what's the matter? Why are you crying? I said, I couldn't speak. This is the vision. And later that night, I went to bed and I said, God, is this? And I just saw that big nod of spirit, like, this is what I want for you. And that started my trajectory of working for the past 10 years in supporting and helping, excuse me, and bringing resources and contribution and awareness and attention to the plight of people, and mostly women and children, on the other side of our planet. And I flew away from that trip, and inside of me, I kept thinking, what is it that I'm feeling? And it's not okay with me what's going on over here. It's not okay with me that citizens of Africa, and particularly East Africa, don't have the basic dignities of life. Sanitation, clean water, equality for women, just the basic tenets of what I subscribe my own life to. So I just made a vow, and I joined with Spirit in that impulse of listening. So that's what started my trajectory, and it's been an amazing journey that's brought me far, far more than I've ever given. It's given me more than I've given to it.
Thank you. It's so beautiful because when you're talking about the vision, and then actually being there and seeing the school and seeing the children, that just really, I felt really moved by that. And what you said about that, like that nod from spirit. And I think we've all had nods from spirit in our own way. And just that was such a big, big nod, like you were in the right place. So, thank you for the beautiful storied kind of introduction into this beautiful work that you've been doing. And I have a question, because I've done volunteer work, but here in the Bay Area, which is where I live, and I'm a mother. My son is older now, but you started doing this work when your children were in school. And I wanted to ask about this because I know that, some of the women who are watching this are mothers, and that might be one of the things that keeps them, one of the ways that they keep themselves from doing work like this, either relief work in other countries or even in their own backyards. So tell me a little bit about the balance of motherhood and traveling and doing this work, and a little bit of that balance, because I'm sure there was some balancing act involved in that. So I'd love to just hear a few thoughts about that piece.
Of course. Well, I think for me, as I stepped out into my own evolutionary path, and part of me related so deeply with being a mother. I since I can remember, a little girl, I wanted to be a mother, and that wish and honor was fulfilled in my mid-20s. And my kids were a little older. I They were in their teens, so as you know, teenagers become a bit more self-sufficient. They're not as needy of being constantly mothered. And so part of my initiation into this work was when I started to feel that space of my kids not needing me as much. As you know, when kids are in junior high, they don't want you around as much, even though I believe they need you more in junior high than they even do when they're younger. But needless to say, I started my own path and stepping out into what is it that I needed and wanted. And again, I referenced finding my own solutions and resolutions to my own inner pain at that time, took me on that spiritual journey, which led me to the service. And I just want to say that when I did that, my kids became extraordinarily proud of me. They were impressed and proud. And so I took that energy and that support that I felt from them with me. I mean, even though they couldn't travel to Africa with me at that time, it was just prohibitive for a lot of reasons, their activities, and kids these days are involved in so much. But upon my return, and within the 10 years of working, I've involved my children. I've asked their opinion. I've shared videos with them. I've told them the stories. And I think just the balancing of being a mother, I've been fortunate enough to have kids that are resourceful themselves. They don't need me at home as much. So we find caretakers while I go on these trips. And at the same time, the fundraising and the engagement here that I did, I took these projects to their schools. I remember one of my daughter's classroom projects. We raised funds for one of the schools. We actually did video conferencing with some of we did a girl power project in Uganda at the time, and I had adolescent girls in Uganda talking with my daughter's friends here in the States, because we're far more the same than we are different. And it was uncanny when you would see the look on the American affluent, relatively affluent girls here living in California, to think you have self-esteem, or the girls in Uganda to think that the girls here had self-esteem issues and worth issues and didn't think they were good enough. They were astounded. The eyes, would pop out of their heads, just thinking, you don't like yourself, or you don't think you're good enough? When African girls tend to think, America is the end-all be-all and everybody here is rich and perfect. So those are the ways I involved my kids. Those are the ways that I was able to balance the work that I did. And it didn't occupy 100% of my time, but I will say that it embeds itself in your heart and it grows there. And it became a part of me and became a part of my family.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. I love the ways that you found to actually involve your children in the work, at least in the portions that happen here. That's gorgeous. I never would have even thought of that. So
I just want to say one more thing. My son, who is my youngest, I have 3 children, and my son, who's now 21, but 10 years ago, he was 11, 12 years old. And he did a trip somewhere to Yosemite. I forget where he went, and he would bring me gifts. And it was this little carved wood continent of Africa necklace, and he wrapped it up and gave it to me for my birthday. And he said, "Here, Mom, because I know how important Africa is to you." And so my kids, even though I didn't obsess about it with them, they knew it was an important part of my life, and so it became an important part of our family.
Well, I want to ask you in a moment, for women who are like, how do I even get my foot in the door to doing relief work, either in Africa or maybe elsewhere? What are the steps to get started? But before I ask about that, I actually just wanted to, I love the rich stories you've already been sharing, and I just have felt really moved, just kind of a little catch in my throat several times during this conversation. So thank you. And I also just found myself wanting to just first thing that comes to your mind, one of the most joyous or beautiful things you experienced doing work there, and maybe one of the most heartbreaking things, I'm sure there are many, that you witnessed doing work there, and just to kind of give us that, your like emotional experience of that whole spectrum.
So many things come to mind because, again, I've done this for 10 years, but in bringing forth what the greatest memories and aspects that I hold and that continue to keep me fueled in pursuing this as my dream. I went to Africa this one time. I saw the school. I met with the children. I videoed. I took pictures. I played. I danced in the schoolyard with them. And then I left, like many Westerners and people from this side of the world do. And then I was invited to go back the next year. And it felt like, why would I go back? And yet I did. And I'll never forget going back and going to some of the same schools and communities to see how they've evolved. And some of the children, Jessica, would say to me quizzically, "You came back?" I said, "Well, of course I did." And they were just so surprised that I would come back and want to know their name. And part of that is the first year when I went, what do you want to be? Because it was education was our primary platform. And I'll answer your question about how to get involved in a moment. And the girls would timidly say, "I want to be a teacher. I want to be a nurse. I want to be, a doctor." And then, through the years I went back, I got to know their names. I got to know Naomi and Grace and Mary and Francis, and they come up with Christian names for themselves along with their mother tongue names. And I would sit with them and begin to get to know them and watch them grow like my own children. And they have personalities and they have, qualities and characteristics unique. Like one might be very assertive and one might be very timid and one might be good at math and another is really good at public speaking. And so, 3-4 years into going back every year to these same communities and getting to know the mamas and the daughters, what do you want to be? And I want to be an architect. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a broadcast journalist. And you're like, wow. I mean, it is not for lack of intelligence that these children, once given the tools of education and they become unstoppable, truly, which leads me to how you do get involved. And for me, I began to understand by talking to the mamas. We would sit in circle, just much like we do here. They really don't dream or desire or wish and hope for much more than we do for our own children. They want better lives for their children than they've had. Most of the mamas in Africa have had very, very challenging, hard lives. They work from sun up to sundown. And we would sit in circle with them and they would say, "We want education for our children. We know that education is the currency of the new millennium. They must be educated in order to survive. This is about survival." And so to know the importance of education became my passion. And to see the children in how they were affected by that education and how the entire communities were uplifted by that, that became my underlying mission and cause, was to promote and instill and provide the unfortunate, the impoverished, the abject poverty. When you give someone an education, you can't ever take it away from them. You can give them food, you can give them water, but they can lose that tomorrow. But when someone is educated and you've enlightened their hope, and when a girl at 13 doesn't get married off and instead she's allowed to go to school and starts to dream of a future better than her mother, that's fundamental paradigm shift. So I started to find, oh, that's what I'm stimulated by. And so for the answer to how do you get involved, where do you start? It starts with drawing deep into what matters most to you. And it does take some investigation and visioning. And I love the question that I posed to you when we started talking about this interview is discover what breaks your heart.
Mm.
Go out into your own communities. And is it children? Is it the environment? Is it education? Is it animals? Is it, whatever your cause is? Is it welfare of women? And start to dig around. I have a woman friend right now who's actually in Uganda. Her mother had passed and she was called. She knew in her heart she was called to do something bigger. And so she went on the internet to find organizations that support the empowerment of women. And the irony is I knew her through another circle of friends, and she found the very organization that I support in Uganda, which is called Girl Up Initiative Uganda. And these are the things that matter to me. I think it was the Dalai Lama that said, the world will be saved by a woman. And when the upliftment and empowerment of women is achieved worldwide, because here we're very fortunate. We have rights and relative equality. But there, they are still under a patriarchal rule that is not okay. But when a woman begins to learn that she has the ability to dream, to wish, to become educated, to store knowledge, to come up with solutions, then they will. And I've seen it thousands of times over now through the women, children, and girls, particularly, because we've started 2 high schools now in very impoverished areas of Africa. So it's just, it stimulates me, it fuels me, it just makes my heart just feel like there's so much more to be done. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that I will be doing this till I'm not able to anymore. And every day I wake up, I say, where should I focus my energies and my gifts today? And it's to these women in Africa, the schools that we support. We're supporting over 9,000 children now in attending elementary and secondary school every day. And with school, it's not just a schoolhouse. It's clean water, it's sanitation, it's health care, it's nutrition, it's medical care. So we have to keep the children fed and healthy so that they can stay in school.
Thank you so much.
I know. I mean, I could talk all day about it.
I love it. Well, we're including here links to that women can click on if they want to know more or donate or get involved in some way with the organization that you're involved with. And I guess I just wanted to complete by asking you if there are any other questions that you wish I would have asked you, or any last piece that you just really want women to know or understand.
Well, I guess I want people to understand that we all, Jessica, I believe, have so many gifts to offer. Our time, our energy, our talents, our creativity, and so much more. And when we commit to that totality of contribution to the world, I believe that is where we tap into that reservoir of power and inspiration that will guide you. I don't know that you don't have to have it all figured out. It really just takes, accessing that first step, that first vision, that first evolutionary impulse to give something and then let spirit pull you the rest of the way. Goodness knows, I would never have imagined 10 years ago that this would have been something I would be involved in to this day. And in that experience has been my understanding that this is why I'm here, is the upliftment and empowerment of women. And that's why organizations like yours are so important, I mean, women crave this. Not only the women in your community, but women world over crave connection, community, that consciousness of working together. And, when we're in contribution to something larger than ourselves is where I believe we find purpose. And that is through our work as well as through finding a cause that you can be a part of. And one last story, I'll never forget sitting here years ago, watching things on TV, crying my eyes out, whether it's Sally Fields talking about Save the Children, and saying, oh, I wish I could be involved, or how could I help? And today when I watch those commercials and those episodes on TV, I sit here and I feel, Jessica, emblazoned and empowered because I am a part of it now. I get to feel like I'm doing that now. I mean, I'm using my life in that force of good, and I'm participating rather than being a bystander. So my message is whatever level you can do, and it doesn't have to be giving away all your money. It's just about being of service, helping volunteer with a video or writing something, or offering, to host a party where you bring your friends together for a cause-related purpose. Mm-hmm. And that's where this collective philanthropy idea comes in. And locally, I'm involved in a number of giving circles where women of ourselves, everybody gives. And yet, when we pool our resources, we can bring together a larger amount to make a larger impact in some of these areas. So I'll also provide you some links of where women can get involved with giving circles, where you feel the empowerment and the exponential momentum of 10 women giving $1,000 and then putting that toward a cause, as opposed to your single $1,000 or $100. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's another opportunity for women to participate in if you just want to get involved and start somewhere small, $100 a quarter or a month.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Gorgeous. Thank you. Thank you so much for just this beautiful, inspiring ideas, because there's so many ways. That's really my takeaways. There's so many ways to be involved. We tend to, I think, maybe just get overwhelmed sometimes when we see the billboards or the images, or like you said, the kind of those commercials on TV. It can we kind of lead ourselves into disempowerment by not taking steps. And I just love that you're offering, like, here's all these different ways that you can empower yourself, and in the process empower so many lives. So I love this. I love the way that you speak to this as part of a life path and as a practice, just like yoga or meditation or any other thing that we as conscious women know that we need to weave into our lives on a regular basis. So thank you so much, Connie, for being here. Thank you for all of the resources. Thank you, women, for sticking with us and really being with us in this conversation and soaking it all in. And just highest prayers and intentions for all of us and for you to go out into the world and to mend the world with divinely guided rebellion and with love and collaboration and joy. So thank you. This has been Rebel Priestess Magazine interview with myself, Jessica Hadari, and with Connie Viveros, Angel Emerging. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.